Before we get into this story, I want to ask you to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you enjoy these real accounts from law enforcement. It helps us bring you more of these stories. And please, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I'm always curious to see how far these stories reach. Now, let's begin. My name is Daniel Begay, and for over 15 years I served as a Navajo Tribal Police officer before the events of 1996, which I witnessed, caused me to question everything I knew about time, reality, and the land my people have regarded as their homeland for centuries. I grew up in the town of Chinle, Arizona, at the mouth of Canyon de Chelly. If you've never been there, it's not easy to describe the feeling that place evokes. The canyon walls rise like ancient sentinels, red rocks carved by wind and water over millions of years. Our people have lived in and around this canyon for nearly 5,000 years. Every rock, every formation, every shadow has its own story. Some of these stories are very special and beautiful, while others serve as warnings and lessons. I joined the Navajo Nation Police in 1981, fresh out of high school, wanting to serve my community. The reservation is vast, covering parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Over 27,000 square miles of high desert mesas, canyons, and isolated communities. Policing that kind of territory comes with unique challenges. You might drive an hour to respond to a call. Backup could be 2 hours away, and the land itself, well, the land has its own rules. My grandfather used to tell me stories about the old days, about things that walked between worlds, about places where time moved differently. I listened respectfully, the way you do with elders, but I didn't really believe. I was a modern cop, trained in criminal justice, evidence collection, proper procedure. I dealt in facts, not folklore. That changed on October 12, 1996. I was working the evening shift, which usually meant patrolling the remote areas around Chinle, checking on the scattered hogans and houses where families lived miles from their nearest neighbors. It was a Saturday evening, and the sun was getting low, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and deep red. Around 7:30 p.m., I got a call from dispatch, a woman's voice, shaky and scared, reporting a domestic disturbance. The address she gave was about 15 miles north of Chinle, off a dirt road that wound through the high desert toward the Chuska Mountains. Unit 12, this is dispatch. We have a 1010 in progress. Caller reports male subject threatening family members. Address is mile marker 7 on Route 12, approximately 200 yards west Hogan with blue door. Caller identified as Mary Yazzie. I acknowledged the call and headed out. Domestic disturbances were common enough, usually fueled by alcohol, poverty, or the grinding stress of reservation life. Most of the time, you could diffuse the situation just by showing up, giving people a chance to cool down, maybe give someone a ride to a relative's house for the night. The drive took about 25 minutes. Route 12 wasn't really a route, more like a maintained dirt road that connected a handful of family compounds. As I drove, the sun dropped below the horizon, and that deep desert darkness started settling in. The kind of darkness that city people don't understand, where your headlights feel like the only light in the entire universe. I found mile marker 7 and turned west onto an even rougher track. My headlights bounced over rocks and ruts, and I kept my speed down, watching for the Hogan. Traditional hogans are easy to spot, round or octagonal structures made from logs and earth, with a doorway that always faces east to greet the dawn. This one had been described as having a blue door, which was unusual but not unheard of. Some families painted their doors for identification or just for decoration. I spotted it about a quarter mile off the road. My headlights picked out the distinctive shape, and sure enough, even in the dimming light, I could see the door was painted a faded turquoise blue. There was a pickup truck parked nearby, a mid-'80s Ford that had seen better days, and I could see light coming from the Hogan's windows. I radioed my position to dispatch. Unit 12, 1097 at the location. One vehicle on scene. Will advise. Copy that. Unit 12. Be safe. I grabbed my flashlight and approached the Hogan. Standard procedure dictated caution on domestic calls. People get emotional, situations can escalate quickly. I could hear voices inside, raised but not quite shouting. A man's voice, low and angry. A woman's voice, pleading. At least one child crying. I knocked on the doorframe loud and clear. "Navajo Police, I need to speak with you." The voices stopped immediately. After a moment, the blue door opened, and a woman looked out at me. She was maybe 35, with long dark hair pulled back in a traditional bun. Wearing a velvet blouse and silver jewelry, her eyes were red from crying, but she seemed relieved to see me. "Thank you for coming, officer," she said quietly in English, then added something in Navajo that I understood as an apology for disturbing me. "It's no trouble, Shima," I replied, using the respectful term. "I'm Officer Begay. I got a call about a disturbance. Is everyone okay?" She glanced back inside, then stepped aside to let me enter. "My husband, he's been drinking. He gets angry. I just wanted someone here to make sure things didn't get worse." I stepped inside, ducking slightly through the doorway. The interior was what I expected. A single, circular room with a wood stove in the center. The smoke hole above it open to the sky. Blankets and sheep pelts on the floor. A kerosene lamp providing warm light. A man sat on the far side of the Hogan, maybe 40 years old, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life working outdoors. He glared at me, but didn't stand. Two children, a girl about 8 and a boy around 5, huddled together on a blanket near their mother. "Good evening," I said to the man. "I'm Officer Begay. I understand there's been some trouble tonight." He muttered something in Navajo, bitter and dismissive. Something about not needing bilingual police officers interfering in family business. I'd heard it before. Some of the older generation resented tribal police, saw us as extensions of federal authority, not true representatives of the people. I couldn't entirely blame them, given our history with the U.S. government. "Sir, I'm here because your wife called," I said calmly. "She's concerned. I just want to make sure everyone's safe." "We're fine," he said in English, his words slightly slurred. "This is family business. You can go." The woman, Mary I assumed, shook her head. "He broke a plate. He pushed me. I don't want the children to see this." I spent the next 20 minutes doing what I'd been trained to do, calming everyone down. Separating the husband and wife to get their stories, checking for injuries. Mary had a bruise forming on her shoulder but insisted she didn't want to press charges. She just wanted him to sober up, maybe sleep it off. The husband, whose name was Thomas Yazzie, eventually calmed down enough to agree to take a walk, clear his head. I offered to drive him to his brother's place a few miles away, let him spend the night there. He agreed, grudgingly. Before I left, I made sure Mary had my card and the number for the domestic violence shelter in Chinle. She thanked me quietly, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. This wasn't the first time, and we both knew it probably wouldn't be the last. I escorted Thomas to my patrol car, making sure he got in without incident. As we drove away, I glanced back at the Hogan in my rearview mirror. The blue door was closed, and the lamplight glowed warm through the windows. A typical domestic call, resolved peacefully. I'd write up my report when I got back to the station. I dropped Thomas off at his brother's house around 9 p.m., made sure he went inside, then started the drive back to Chinle. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead. In that way, they only are in places far from city lights. I felt good about how the call had gone, about helping that family get through a difficult night. My radio crackled at 9:45 p.m., just as I was passing mile marker 7 again. Unit 12, we're getting another call from the same location. Mary Yazzie reporting her husband has returned and the situation has escalated. Can you respond? I frowned. That was impossible. I just left Thomas at his brother's house 15 minutes ago. There was no way he could have gotten back that quickly, especially without a vehicle. Dispatch, are you sure it's the same address? I just cleared that scene 20 minutes ago. Affirmative. Unit 12. Same caller, same location. She sounds frightened. Says her husband is threatening to hurt someone. My gut tightened. Something was wrong. Maybe Thomas's brother had driven him back, though that seemed unlikely. Or maybe there was confusion in the dispatch, a wrong address. Copy that, dispatch. Responding now. I turned around and headed back up Route 12, pushing my speed a little faster than I should have on that rough road. Something felt off, and years of police work had taught me to trust that feeling. I found mile marker 7 and turned west onto the same track I'd taken less than an hour ago. As I came around the rise, I expected to see the Hogan, the blue door, the old Ford pickup. There was nothing there. I stopped my patrol car and stared. The spot where the Hogan had been was just empty desert. Scrub brush, rocks, dirt, no structure, no truck, no tire tracks, nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and got out, walking to the exact spot where I'd parked before. I was certain this was the right location. I recognized the rock formations, the shape of the small arroyo nearby. This was definitely the place, but there was no Hogan. I walked in a circle, shining my flashlight across the ground. No foundation stones, no evidence that a structure had ever been here. The desert floor was undisturbed, covered in the kind of old, crusted dirt that doesn't get disturbed often. I radioed dispatch, keeping my voice level despite the confusion rising in my chest. Dispatch Unit 12, I'm at the location from the earlier call. There's no structure here. Can you confirm the address? There was a pause. Unit 12, confirming address mile marker 7, Route 12, approximately 200 yards west. Hogan with blue door. Dispatch, there's no Hogan here. The location is empty desert. Are you sure we don't have a different address for the callback? Another pause. Longer this time. I heard voices in the background at dispatch, people talking quickly. Unit 12, we have Mary Yazzie on the line now. She says you were just there an hour ago. She's asking where you are. A chill ran down my spine. Put her through. The radio clicked, and I heard a woman's voice, frightened and crying. Officer? Officer Begay? Why did you leave? He came back, and he's worse now. Please, you said you'd help us. It was Mary's voice. I recognized it. But that was impossible. Ma'am, I'm at the location you gave earlier. There's no structure here. Can you see my patrol car lights? What? No, I can't see anything. Officer, we're inside the Hogan. Please, he's scaring the children. My hands were shaking now. This didn't make sense. I was standing in the exact spot where that Hogan had been, and there was nothing here. Ma'am, I need you to step outside. I need to see you. I can't. He won't let me. Please, just come inside like before. You helped us before. I'm trying to help you now, but I can't find your Hogan. Is there another landmark I can use? Something nearby? We're where we've always been. Officer, please. The radio cut to static. Then dispatch came back on. Unit 12, we lost the connection. What's your status? I stood there in the darkness, my flashlight beam sweeping across empty desert, and felt the first real stab of fear. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a wrong address. Something was fundamentally wrong here. Dispatch, I'm requesting backup and a supervisor to this location. I need someone else to verify what I'm seeing. Copy that, Unit 12. Nearest backup is Officer Sosi, ETA 40 minutes. 40 minutes. I looked around at the empty desert, then back at my patrol car. My body camera had been recording this whole time. At least I'd have footage to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I decided to wait in my car for backup. As I walked back to the vehicle, my flashlight passed over something that made me stop. In the dirt, barely visible, was a single footprint, small, like a child's. And next to it, partially buried in the sand, was a piece of broken pottery with a turquoise glaze. Blue, like the door. I bent down and picked it up carefully, turning it over in my light. It was old, the glaze cracked and faded, but it was definitely pottery, and definitely blue. I bagged it as evidence, though evidence of what, I couldn't say. I sat in my patrol car with the engine running, heater on against the October chill, and waited. The desert around me was silent except for the occasional gust of wind. I kept my flashlight and my radio close, watching the darkness beyond my headlights. At 10:30 p.m., I saw headlights approaching from the south. Officer Russ Sosi pulled up next to me, and I'd never been so relieved to see another human being. Russ was in his 50s, a veteran officer who'd been with the tribal police since before I was born. He'd seen everything, or so he claimed. He got out of his car and walked over to my window. "Daniel, what's going on? Dispatch said you needed backup for a domestic, but the caller disappeared?" I explained everything. The first call, the family, taking Thomas to his brother's house, coming back to find nothing there. The second call from Mary. Russ listened without interrupting, his weathered face neutral. When I finished, he looked out at the empty desert, then back at me. "Show me where the Hogan was." We walked to the spot together. I pointed out the landmarks I'd used to confirm the location. Russ took his own flashlight and searched the area methodically. No foundation, no fire pit, no trash, nothing, he said finally. "Daniel, are you sure this is the right spot?" "I'm certain I drove this exact route twice. I recognize these rocks, that arroyo. This is where it was." Russ was quiet for a moment. "Your body cam was on?" "The whole time." "Then let's look at the footage." We went back to my patrol car, and I pulled up the body camera interface on my in-car computer. The tribal police had recently started using body cameras, though the equipment was often temperamental. I rewound to 7:40 p.m. when I'd first arrived at the scene. We watched as the footage showed my approach to the Hogan, the blue door, Mary opening it, the interior of the structure, the family, Thomas, all of it. 47 minutes of footage, clear as day. Russ and I watched in silence as the recording showed me escorting Thomas out, getting in my car, driving away. The Hogan was visible in the background as I left. "It's all there," Russ said quietly. "The Hogan, the family, everything, but there's nothing here now." "I'm not crazy," I said, hearing the edge in my voice. "I was there. I talked to them. That Hogan existed." "I believe you," Russ said, and I could hear he meant it. "But Daniel, I've been a cop on this reservation for 30 years. I've seen things that can't be explained, things that don't follow the rules we learned in academy. This land, it's old. Sometimes old things don't stay buried." "What are you saying?" He looked at me with those dark, knowing eyes. "I'm saying maybe you responded to a call that wasn't happening in our time. Maybe that Hogan exists, but not right now. Not tonight." "That's impossible." "Is it? You have 47 minutes of footage of a place that isn't here. What's more impossible, that you're losing your mind, or that you saw something that exists somewhere else in time." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. The evidence was right there on the screen. "We need to research this," Russ said. "Find out if there was ever a Hogan at this location. Check old BIA records, land surveys, anything. If a family named Yazzie lived here, there'll be some kind of record. And if there is, then we'll know you're not crazy, and we'll have to figure out what it means. We spent another hour at the site, taking measurements, marking the location with GPS, photographing everything. The piece of blue pottery I'd found went into evidence. Then we drove back to Chinle together, Russ following me to make sure I was okay. At the station, we filed our reports. Russ noted the discrepancy between my body cam footage and the current state of the location. We flagged it for investigation and logged the pottery as found evidence. I drove home around 1 a.m., exhausted and shaken. My wife, Lisa, was waiting up for me. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Bad night?" she asked. "Strange night," I said, not sure how to explain what had happened. I told her about the call, the Hogan, the vanishing. She listened quietly, her hand in mine. "Your grandfather used to talk about places like that," she said when I finished. Places where time was thin, where the past could bleed through. "I don't believe in that. Maybe you should start." I went to bed, but couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Mary Yazzie's face, the fear in her eyes. The children huddled on that blanket. They'd seemed so real. They'd been real, at least in that moment. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off. I dreamed I was back at the Hogan, but this time when I opened the blue door, I saw myself standing inside, looking back at me. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The next morning, I went to the station early to start researching. I needed to know if the Yazzie family had ever lived at that location. I needed proof that what I'd seen wasn't just a hallucination or some kind of breakdown. But what I found in the old Bureau of Indian Affairs records would make everything so much worse because Mary and Thomas Yazzie had lived at that location. They had lived in a Hogan with a blue door in 1974. And according to the records, their Hogan had burned to the ground on October 12, 1974. Exactly 22 years ago to the day with the family still inside. I stared at the faded BIA document in front of me, reading the words over and over, hoping they'd change. But they didn't. Fire report, October 12, 1974. Location, mile marker 7, Route 12, Chinle District. Structure, traditional Hogan, blue-painted door. Casualties, Thomas Yazzie, 42, Mary Yazzie, 36, daughters Lily, 8, and Emma, 5. Cause of fire, undetermined. Structure completely destroyed. Remains recovered and buried according to traditional customs. The report had been filed by Officer John Nez, who'd retired years before I joined the force. There was a handwritten note at the bottom that made my skin crawl. Family refused evacuation assistance prior to incident. Hogan sealed and abandoned per Chindi protocol. Chindi. The Navajo belief that when someone dies, especially in a violent or tragic way, an evil spirit remains in the place of death. Traditional Hogans where people died were either burned or permanently abandoned, the doorway sealed to trap the Chindi inside. But according to this report, the Hogan had already burned, with the family inside. So what had I seen last night? Russ found me in the records room at 8 a.m., surrounded by dusty file boxes and old photographs. He set a cup of coffee down next to me without a word, then pulled up a chair. "You find something," he said. It wasn't a question. I showed him the fire report. He read it slowly, his face growing more grave with each line. "The dates match," he said quietly. October 12th, 1974. October 12th, 1996. 22 years to the day. I talked to them, Russ. They were real. Mary was scared. The children were crying. Thomas was drunk and angry. It wasn't a ghost or a vision. They were solid physical people. I believe you." He pulled out another document from his own folder. I did some checking too. Found the original land survey from 1960. There was a hogan at that exact location, owned by the Yazzie family. But there's something else. He unfolded an old map, pointing to the spot marked in faded pencil. This survey shows 3 hogans at that site over a 40-year period. One from the 1950s, one from the 1960s, and the one from 1974, all in the same spot, all abandoned or destroyed. 3 different hogans in the same location. It's not uncommon. Families rebuild on traditional sites, especially if it's good land near water or grazing. But Daniel, I checked the records for all 3 structures. All 3 had incidents. Deaths, violence, tragedy. That spot has a bad history. I felt cold, despite the coffee warming my hands. You think the place itself is cursed? I think something about that location makes the barrier between times thin, like a crack in reality, and whatever happened there keeps bleeding through, especially on the anniversary. That's not possible. You keep saying that, but the evidence says otherwise. You have body cam footage of people who died 22 years ago. That's evidence, Daniel. That's real. He was right. I had proof. 47 minutes of digital video showing me interacting with the Yazzie family and their hogan, a hogan that no longer existed. What do we do? I asked. We wait and see if it happens again. If that hogan is cycling through different times, it might appear again. Maybe tonight. Maybe in a few days. But we need to be ready. And we need to document everything. I spent the rest of the day researching the other hogans that had stood at that location. The first one, built in the early 1950s, belonged to a family named Benally. According to the records, the father had killed his wife and 2 sons in 1956, then taken his own life. The hogan was burned by the community afterward. The second hogan, from the 1960s, belonged to the Tsozi family. They'd abandoned it in 1968 after their teenage daughter disappeared. She was never found, and the family believed she'd been taken by skinwalkers. The hogan was left to collapse on its own. Then, the Yazzie family built the third hogan in 1972. 2 years later, they all died in the fire. 3 hogans, 3 tragedies, all in the same spot. And all of them leaving Chindi behind. That evening, I went back to the location. I didn't tell Lisa where I was going. I just said I had to follow up on something from the previous night. She looked worried but didn't press. I arrived at mile marker 7 just before sunset, that same golden light painting the desert. I parked in the same spot and walked to the location where the hogan should be empty desert. Nothing but dirt and scrub brush. I set up a folding chair and settled in to wait. My body cam was fully charged, and I had a thermos of coffee and a flashlight. If the hogan appeared again, I'd be ready. The sun went down, and the temperature dropped fast the way it does in the high desert. I pulled my jacket tighter and watched the empty space in front of me. At 8:30 p.m., I felt it before I saw it. A subtle change in the air, like a pressure shift before a storm. The hair on my arms stood up, and I heard a sound like wind chimes, though there was no wind. And then it was there. The hogan materialized like someone slowly turning up the contrast on a photograph. First, just an outline, then more solid, then completely real. The blue door, the log walls, the smoke rising from the smoke hole, but it wasn't the same hogan. This one looked older, more weathered. The blue paint on the door was brighter, less faded. And the truck parked nearby was from the 1960s, a Chevrolet that looked almost new. I stood up slowly, my hand on my radio. I should call this in, get Russ out here. But something made me hesitate. This was my case, my mystery to solve. I approached the hogan and knocked on the doorframe. The door opened, and a teenage girl looked out at me. She was maybe 16, with long dark hair and traditional jewelry. She stared at me in confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked in Navajo. I responded in the same language. "I'm Officer Begay with the Navajo Police. I got a call about a disturbance at this location." Her confusion deepened. "There's no disturbance, we're just having dinner." A woman's voice called from inside, asking who was at the door. The girl turned and said something I couldn't hear, then looked back at me. "My mother says to invite you in. It's cold out." I hesitated, then accepted. If I was going to understand what was happening here, I needed to engage with it directly. The interior was similar to what I'd seen the night before, but different in the details. Newer blankets, different cooking pots, a calendar on the wall that made my breath catch May 1968. A woman in her 40s smiled at me from where she sat near the fire. "Welcome, officer. I'm Helen Sosi. This is my daughter, Annie. Can we offer you some coffee?" Sosi. This was the family that had abandoned the Hogan after their daughter disappeared. And I was looking at that daughter right now, alive and healthy, in 1968. "Thank you," I managed. "I'm sorry to disturb your dinner. There must have been some mistake with the address." "No trouble at all. We don't get many visitors out here." Helen gestured for me to sit. "You look cold. Please warm yourself." I sat, trying to process what was happening. I was inside a Hogan that wouldn't be abandoned for another few months, talking to people who, in my time, were either dead or had lived through tragedy decades ago. Annie was watching me with curious eyes. "You're not from around here, are you? Your uniform looks strange." I glanced down at my tribal police uniform, the modern patches and equipment that wouldn't exist in 1968. "I'm from the Chinle district," I said carefully. "Just doing routine patrols." "Do you know my cousin, Officer John Nez?" Helen asked. "He works for the tribal police." John Nez, the officer who'd written the report about the Yazzie fire in 1968. He would have been a young officer, just like me. "I know of him," I said. "Good man." We talked for a few more minutes, small talk about the weather, the livestock, the community. I was careful not to say anything that would reveal I was from the future. The whole time my body cam was recording, documenting this impossible conversation. Then Helen said something that made my blood run cold. "Annie's going to Window Rock tomorrow. She has an interview at the BIA office. She's hoping to get a job there." I knew what happened tomorrow, or rather what had happened 28 years ago. Annie Tsosi would leave for Window Rock and never arrive. She would disappear somewhere on that road, and her family would search for months before finally giving up, believing she'd been taken by dark forces. "Mrs. Tsosi," I said carefully, "maybe Annie should wait a few days before making that trip. The roads can be dangerous." Helen looked puzzled. "Why? The weather's clear." "Just a feeling. Sometimes it's better to wait." Annie laughed. "Are you a Hatawi now, officer? Reading signs?" Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Helen stood to answer it, and when she opened it, I felt reality shift again. Standing in the doorway was another police officer, but his uniform was from my time, modern patches and all. It was Russ. He looked at me, then at the family, then back at me. "Daniel, we need to go, now." "Who are you?" Helen asked, backing away from the door. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Russ said. "We're responding to the wrong call. Daniel, come on." I stood, thanked Helen for her hospitality, and followed Russ outside. The moment we crossed the threshold, I felt that pressure shift again. I turned to look back, and the Hogan was gone. Just empty desert. "What the hell are you doing?" Russ demanded. "I've been trying to radio you for 20 minutes. Your signal kept cutting out." I was inside. The Hogan appeared, but it was from 1968. The Tsosie family, Russ. I talked to Annie Tsosie, the girl who disappeared. He grabbed my shoulders. Daniel, listen to me. You can't interact with them. You can't change what happened. It's already done. All of it is already done. But if I can warn them, maybe what? Maybe you prevent her disappearance and create a paradox. Maybe you erase their entire timeline. You don't know how this works. None of us do. The safest thing is to observe and document, not interfere. A girl is going to disappear tomorrow. In 1968, I could save her. She already disappeared, Daniel. 28 years ago, you can't save her because she's already gone. What you saw was just an echo, a recording playing back. You weren't really in 1968. You were in some kind of impression of it. It felt real. I know, but we can't trust it. We can't trust any of this. We drove back to Chinle in silence. When I got home, I reviewed my body cam footage from inside the Hogan. It was all there, clear and documented. 53 minutes of conversation with the family from 1968. Lisa found me watching it at midnight, staring at the screen. Daniel, you need to sleep. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. All of them, the families who lived in that Hogan, who died there, who suffered there. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do about it. She sat next to me, taking my hand. Maybe you're not supposed to do anything. Maybe you're just supposed to witness it. That's not enough. Sometimes it has to be. Over the next week, I returned to the location every night. The Hogan appeared 3 more times, each time showing a different era, a different family. On the 3rd night, it was the Benally family from the 1950s I watched from a distance as the father, clearly drunk and violent, threatened his wife and children. I wanted to intervene, wanted to stop what I knew was coming, but Russ's words held me back. It had already happened. This was just an echo. On the 5th night, it was the Yazzie family again. But earlier than my first encounter, it was 1973, a year before the fire. They were happy, laughing, Mary teaching her daughters a traditional song. It was heartbreaking to watch, knowing what was coming. On the 7th night, something different happened. The Hogan appeared as usual, but when I approached and looked through the window, I saw myself. I was sitting inside with a family I didn't recognize, wearing my uniform but looking older. Maybe 10 years older. Future me turned and looked directly at present me through the window. He stood and walked to the door, opening it. "You're early," future me said. "I didn't start investigating until next week in my timeline." I couldn't speak. I was looking at myself, older and more weathered, with gray in my hair and deeper lines around my eyes. "Come in," he said. "We need to talk about what's going to happen." I stepped inside, and the family I didn't recognize nodded at me politely. A father, mother, and 2 teenage boys. They seemed unconcerned about the 2 versions of me standing in their home. "Who are they?" I asked. "The Begay family," future me said. "Our family, Lisa, our sons, from 2023. My heart stopped. That's not possible. Lisa and I don't have children yet. "We will, 2 boys, Daniel Jr. and Daniel. And on October 12th, 2023, we're going to move into a new house. Can you guess where?" I felt sick. No, we wouldn't. Not after everything I've seen here. We won't know. In my timeline, I stopped investigating. I convinced myself it was all stress, hallucinations, something explainable. I deleted the body cam footage, destroyed the evidence, tried to forget. So, when a beautiful piece of land came up for sale, cheap because of its history, we bought it and we built our house right here. And what happens? Future me's face was grim. The same thing that's happened to every family who lived on this land tragedy. Violence, death. The land doesn't just echo the past, it demands repetition. It's like a loop that needs to be fed. How do I stop it? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. That's why I came back to this night to warn you, to tell you to keep investigating, keep documenting. Don't give up like I did. But if you're here warning me, does that mean I succeed? Does that mean I stop it? He shook his head. I don't know. Time here doesn't work like that. Every version of events seems to exist simultaneously. Maybe in one timeline you stop it. Maybe in another you don't. Maybe we're all just echoes, playing out our parts over and over. The pressure in the air shifted again. Future me looked alarmed. It's collapsing. The timeline is collapsing. Listen to me, Daniel. The key is, the Hogan vanished, and I was standing alone in the empty desert. His words cut off mid-sentence. I fell to my knees in the dirt, shaking. I'd just seen my future. A future where Lisa and I had children, where we lived on this cursed land, where tragedy found us, just like it had found everyone else. Unless I could figure out how to break the cycle. I drove straight to the Tribal Historic Preservation Office the next morning. If this land had such a dark history, there had to be something in the traditional knowledge, some way our ancestors dealt with places like this. The preservation officer, an elder named Thomas Begay, no relation, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. You've seen the Chinle house, he finally said. My grandfather spoke of such places. Locations where the barrier between worlds grows thin because of repeated tragedy. The violence and fear create a wound in the fabric of reality. How do you heal such a wound? Traditionally, with ceremony. A blessing way performed by a skilled hatawi, but for a wound this deep, this old, I don't know if ceremony would be enough. The land has soaked up too much pain, too much death. There has to be a way. Perhaps. But consider this, you've been entering that place, interacting with it. Every time you do, you leave a piece of yourself behind. You become part of the echo, you might be strengthening it rather than weakening it. His words hit me like a physical blow. Had I been making it worse? Had my investigation been feeding the very thing I was trying to stop? That night, I didn't go back to the location. I stayed home with Lisa, holding her close, thinking about the children we might have someday, about the future I'd glimpsed. But around midnight, my phone rang. It was dispatch. Officer Begay, we have a 1010 in progress. Domestic disturbance. Location is mile marker 7, Route 12, approximately 200 yards west Hogan with blue door. Caller identified as Mary Yazzie. The same call, the same family, the cycle beginning again. Dispatch, I said slowly. What's today's date? October 12th, 1996. Why? I'm not responding to that call. Excuse me? I said I'm not responding. Send another unit. There was shocked silence. Then, Officer Begay, you're required to respond to all domestic disturbance calls. This is protocol. Send another unit. I hung up and turned off my phone. Lisa was watching me from the bedroom doorway. What's happening? I'm breaking the cycle, or trying to. I think the Hogan needs me to respond, needs me to be part of the pattern, so I'm refusing. We stayed up all night, waiting to see what would happen. My radio was still on, and I heard dispatch send Officer Tsosi to the location. I heard him report that there was no structure at the site. I heard the confusion in his voice, the same confusion I'd felt. But I didn't go. I stayed home. As dawn broke, Lisa made coffee, and we sat together watching the sunrise. Did it work? She asked. I don't know. Maybe, or maybe I just delayed the inevitable. My phone rang. I'd turned it back on an hour earlier. It was Russ, Daniel, we need to talk. Something happened last night at that location. Something different. What do you mean? The Hogan appeared, but only for about 30 seconds, then it collapsed in on itself like it was being erased. And there was a sound, like dozens of voices all crying out at once. Then nothing. It's gone, Daniel, completely gone. I've been here all morning, and there's no trace of it. No shimmer, no pressure changes, nothing. Is that good? I think so. I think by breaking the pattern, by refusing to respond, you might have disrupted the cycle. The Hogan needed that October 12th response, needed an officer to interact with it. Without that, the loop couldn't complete. I felt a weight lift from my chest. So, it's over? Maybe. We should monitor the site, especially on future October 12ths, but for now, yes, I think it might be over. I thanked him and hung up. Lisa was watching me with hopeful eyes. Is it done? I think so. We held each other as the sun climbed higher, warming the world, burning away the shadows of the night. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake one nagging thought. Future me had tried to tell me something, had tried to warn me about the key to solving this. His words had been cut off, but I'd heard the beginning. The key is what? I'd broken the cycle, or at least interrupted it. But I didn't really understand what I'd done or why it worked, and that uncertainty would haunt me for years to come. Because 3 weeks later, I received a package at the station. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I recognized as my own. Inside was a body camera memory card and a note. The note read, "Daniel, this is you from 2006, 10 years from now. I'm sending you this because you need to see what happens if you let your guard down." The Hogan didn't disappear. It just went dormant. Watch the footage. Learn from my mistakes. Don't build on that land. Ever. D. I loaded the memory card into my computer with shaking hands. The footage showed me, older again, standing in front of a modern house. The same location, mile marker 7, and the house had a blue door. The timestamp on the footage read October 12th, 2006, exactly 10 years in the future. The cycle hadn't ended. It had just evolved. I watched the footage from 2006 17 times before I could accept what I was seeing. The video started with future me, looking exactly as I'd seen before, walking toward a modern ranch-style house. The architecture was contemporary, but the location was unmistakable. The rock formations, the arroyo, the view of the distant canyon walls mile marker 7, Route 12, and the front door was painted blue. Future me's body cam captured him entering the house. Lisa's voice called from somewhere inside, asking if he'd remembered to pick up groceries' normal domestic sounds. Children laughing, a dog barking. Then the atmosphere changed. The laughter stopped. Future me moved through the house quickly, calling for Lisa, for the boys. His breathing got faster. The camera showed room after room, each one empty but showing signs of recent occupation. A pot boiling over on the stove. The TV on, but no one watching. Toys scattered on the floor. He found them in the master bedroom. Lisa and 2 boys, maybe 8 and 10 years old, standing in a circle, holding hands. Their eyes were closed, and they were swaying slightly as if in a trance. Future me approached cautiously. "Lisa? Boys? What are you doing?" They didn't respond, just kept swaying. And then, all together, they opened their eyes. Black. Completely black. Like the woman from the Honda Accord in the stories I'd heard from other officers. No whites, no iris, just darkness. And they spoke in unison, voices overlapping, creating that awful harmonic tone I'd heard described before. The house remembers. The land remembers. We are part of the remembering now. Future me backed away, and the footage showed him running from the house, getting in his patrol car, driving away fast. The video ended with him parked on the side of the road, hyperventilating, calling someone on his phone. I ejected the memory card and sat in the dark station office, trying to process what I'd seen. That was my future. 10 years from now. Lisa and children I didn't even have yet. Possessed or transformed by whatever dark force haunted that land, unless I could prevent it. I needed help, real help. Not just police procedures and investigation, but someone who understood the traditional ways, the old knowledge that my generation had mostly lost. The next morning, I drove to see my grandfather. He lived in a small house on the outskirts of Chinle, where he'd lived alone since my grandmother passed 5 years earlier. He was 83 years old, a Hatawi, a traditional medicine man, though he rarely practiced anymore. I found him outside, tending to his sheep. When he saw me pull up, he smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes, like he already knew why I'd come. Ya ate shichei, I greeted him respectfully. Ya ate shitsui, he replied, using the term for grandson. You look troubled. Come inside, I'll make coffee. We sat in his small kitchen, and I told him everything, the Hogans appearing and disappearing, the families from different timelines, the future I'd seen on the body cam footage. He listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. I knew this would come to you eventually, he finally said. Your great-grandfather was the first to see it back in 1937. He was a young man then, riding his horse through that area. He saw a Hogan that shouldn't have been there, heard voices from a family that had died years before. He tried to tell people, but no one believed him. They thought the sun had gotten to him. Did he figure out what was causing it? He spent years studying it, talking to the elders, learning the old stories. He came to believe that place was a crack between worlds, a thin place where the boundaries between past, present, and future could break down, and each tragedy that happened there made the crack wider. How do you seal such a crack? Grandfather sighed. That's the question he struggled with until he died. Traditional ceremonies can cleanse a place of chindi, can restore balance. But this is different. This isn't just spirits of the dead. This is time itself bleeding. The land has become like a wound that won't heal because it keeps being reopened. There has to be a way to stop it. Perhaps. But consider this. Every time you interact with that place, you create another thread in the pattern you've seen yourself from the future, yes? That means the loop includes you. You're not just investigating it, you're part of it now. His words echoed what Thomas Begay had told me. I was becoming woven into the temporal anomaly. What if I never build there? What if I make sure we never move to that location? Can you be certain? You've seen a version of yourself that did build there. Maybe in one timeline you don't, but in another you do. And once you've seen it, once you know it's possible, it becomes more likely. Observation affects outcome. The old quantum teachings say this. I'd never heard my grandfather talk about quantum physics before. You know about quantum mechanics? He smiled slightly. I know that the old wisdom and new science often say the same things in different languages. The observer affects the observed. Every choice creates branching paths. All possibilities exist until the moment of choosing. Your scientists proved what we've always known. So, what do I choose? How do I make sure I choose right? Perhaps the question isn't how to choose right, but how to stop the land from forcing the choice. The location itself has become like a whirlpool in time, pulling people toward tragedy. To stop it, you might need to change the land itself. How? I don't know. But I know someone who might. Your uncle, Raymond Begay. He's a geologist, works for the tribe's Natural Resources Department. He understands the physical nature of the land. Together, you and he might find an answer. I left my grandfather's house with a new direction. If the anomaly was connected to the physical location, maybe there was something about the geology, the minerals, the structure of the earth itself that was creating or amplifying the effect. Uncle Raymond worked out of the tribal offices in Window Rock. I called him and explained I needed to talk about some unusual geological features near Chinle. He agreed to meet me the next day. Raymond was in his 50s, a quiet man with advanced degrees in geology and mineralogy. I'd always liked him, even though we rarely saw each other. He met me at his office, which was filled with rock samples, maps, and scientific equipment. "Daniel, good to see you. What's this about unusual geology?" I told him about the location, leaving out the supernatural elements at first, just focused on the physical facts. The site had a history of repeated tragedy, structures built and destroyed multiple times. I asked if there could be anything about the land itself that might affect human behavior or perception. Raymond pulled out a topographical map and marked the location. Mile marker 7, Route 12. Interesting. Let me check something. He went to his computer and pulled up various geological surveys. His expression changed as he studied the data. "This is fascinating," he muttered. "The site sits directly over a significant magnetite deposit. Magnetite is a naturally magnetic mineral. High concentrations can affect compass readings, animal behavior, even human perception in some cases. Could it affect time perception?" He looked at me strangely. "That's an odd question. Why would time perception be relevant?" I decided to trust him. I told him about the temporal anomalies, the Hogans appearing from different eras, the body cam footage. He listened with growing disbelief, but to his credit, he didn't dismiss it outright. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then we're dealing with something beyond conventional geology. But the magnetite deposit is interesting. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that intense magnetic fields, under certain conditions, could affect space-time locally. It's highly speculative, mostly considered fringe science. But possible. In theory, yes. Extremely high magnetic field strengths combined with other factors like rotational motion or unusual quantum states might create localized temporal distortions. But we're talking about magnetic fields far stronger than what natural deposits would produce. What if it's not just the magnetite? What if there's something else amplifying the effect?" Raymond thought about this. "Let me do a full geological survey of the site. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetic field measurements, soil samples. If there's something unusual about the location's physical properties, I'll find it." We drove to the site that afternoon. Raymond brought his equipment, and I watched as he set up sensors and scanning devices around the empty desert. I stayed well back, not wanting to trigger any temporal effects while he worked. After 3 hours of measurements, Raymond called me over. His face was pale. "Daniel, this is impossible. The magnetic field strength here is fluctuating wildly. I'm reading variations from normal background levels to intensities that should only exist near industrial electromagnets, and the pattern of fluctuation is regular, like a pulse. What's causing it?" "I don't know. It's like there's something deep underground, maybe 200 feet down, generating a magnetic field that oscillates, but there's no natural process I know of that would create this pattern." "Could it be artificial? Something man-made?" "Maybe. But if so, it would have to be ancient. The magnetite deposit is natural, formed millions of years ago. Whatever's interacting with it would have to be integrated into the geological structure. An idea occurred to me. Could you map when the magnetic pulses are strongest? Raymond checked his data. Based on the readings I've taken over the past 3 hours, the field strength peaks every 43 minutes, then drops to near normal levels. Why? The Hogan appears at irregular intervals, but when it does appear, it stays for about 30 to 50 minutes. What if it's synchronized with the magnetic pulses? Raymond's eyes widened. If the magnetic field is somehow creating a temporal distortion, then yes, the appearance of structures from other times would correlate with peak field strength, Daniel. We need to bring in more equipment. This could be the most significant geological and physical discovery of the century. No, I said firmly. We can't go public with this. Not yet. If word gets out, this place will be swarmed with scientists, military, who knows what. And we don't know how that kind of attention might affect the anomaly. But this could answer fundamental questions about the nature of time, it could also put people in danger. We need to understand it first, then figure out how to neutralize it. Raymond reluctantly agreed. For the next week, he conducted more surveys, always staying back from the immediate area, never entering when the Hogan appeared. He discovered that the magnetic anomaly was centered on a point about 200 feet underground, directly beneath where the Hogans had stood. It's like there's a massive magnetic dynamo down there, he explained, rotating or oscillating, creating a field that pulses in a regular pattern, but I can't determine what it is without drilling, and I'm not sure drilling is wise. It's not, I agreed. If we disrupt whatever's down there, we might make things worse. But even as we researched the physical properties of the site, I kept returning to the temporal mystery. Why did the Hogan cycle through specific dates? Why always families named Yazzie, Zosi, Benali, and Begay? Why was I seeing my own future? I went through the body cam footage again, frame by frame, looking for clues. In the video from 1968, I noticed something in the background, a calendar on the wall, and on October 12th, someone had written a single word in Navajo, Niushi, wind, or more specifically, the holy wind, the spiritual force that animates all living things in Navajo cosmology. I showed the footage to my grandfather. He studied the calendar carefully. The holy wind, he said, the life force. Why would they mark October 12th with this word? I don't know. Is there significance to October 12th in traditional teachings? He thought about this. Not that I know of, but let me consult the old calendars, the ones that track ceremonial dates according to the traditional year. He spent 2 days going through old papers and books, talking to other elders. Finally, he called me back to his house. I found something, he said, spreading out a very old calendar made of hide. October 12th, in our traditional calendar, sometimes corresponds with a specific day in the ceremonial cycle. The day when the boundary between worlds is thinnest, when the spirits can cross most easily. It's similar to what other cultures call a thin time. So, October 12th is always a thin time? Not always. It depends on the lunar cycle and other factors. But in certain years, yes. And here's what's interesting. I checked the historical records. The years when tragedies occurred at that location. 1937, 1956, 1968, 1974, and the ones you've experienced in 1996, they all fell on years when October 12th aligned with the thin time in our traditional calendar. A pattern. Everything was connected by pattern. The magnetic pulses, the dates, the families, all of it synchronized in some cosmic rhythm. What about 2006? I asked. The year from the body cam footage, does October 12th align with thin time then? He checked his calculations. Yes, and 2016, and 2026. Every 10 years, the alignment repeats. 10-year cycles. The Hogan appeared in regular intervals during the thin times when the magnetic field interacted with the temporal boundary. I understood now the location was a perfect storm of factors. The magnetic anomaly underground creating a physical distortion, the traditional thin time creating a spiritual opening, and the repeated tragedies feeding the pattern, making it stronger with each cycle. To break it, I'd need to disrupt all three factors. But how? That night, the Hogan appeared again. But this time, something was different. I'd set up surveillance equipment around the perimeter, cameras and magnetic field sensors. I stayed back and watched from my patrol car. The structure materialized at 8:43 p.m., right on schedule with the magnetic pulse, but this time I could see something I'd missed before. The air around the Hogan shimmered with a faint luminescence, like heat waves but with color blues and purples that shouldn't exist in nature. And there were sounds. Not from inside the Hogan, but from the space between realities. Whispers, cries, fragments of conversation from dozens of different voices, all overlapping. It was like looking at a crack in the world, and through that crack, I could see and hear echoes of every timeline that touched this spot. Every version of events, every possible outcome, all existing simultaneously. I recorded everything, documenting the phenomenon from every angle. And then I saw something that made me grab my radio. Inside the Hogan, through the window, I could see a family. But it wasn't any of the historical families I'd encountered before. It was Lisa and our two sons. The same ages as in the 2006 footage, but the timestamp on my camera read 1996. They shouldn't exist yet. They were from the future, pulled back to this moment by the temporal distortion. And then I realized the horrible truth. Time at this location wasn't just bleeding, it was collapsing. Past, present, and future were all being drawn to the same point, compressed into the same space. The more I investigated, the more I interacted with the anomaly, the stronger it became. I was feeding it. My future family's presence was feeding it. Every observation, every recording, every attempt to understand was making the collapse worse. The Hogan started to flicker, shifting between different versions. The 1950s structure, the 1960s, the 1970s, and the modern house from 2006, all occupying the same space, cycling faster and faster. And then they all appeared at once, 4 different structures, superimposed over each other, all solid, all real, all impossible. Inside, I could see all the families simultaneously, the Benallis, the Tsosis, the Yazis, and my own future family, all occupying the same space, walking through each other like ghosts, each unaware of the others. The magnetic field sensors were screaming, showing readings off the scale. The ground beneath the structures started to glow with that same blue-purple light. And from somewhere deep underground, I heard a sound, a low, resonant hum that I felt in my bones. The magnetic dynamo Raymond had detected was spinning faster, the field intensifying. The collapse was accelerating. If it continued, the temporal distortion might become permanent, might spread beyond this location. The thin place might tear completely. I had to do something. But what? Then I remembered my grandfather's words. Perhaps the question isn't how to choose right, but how to stop the land from forcing the choice. I had to remove the choice. Remove the possibility of building there, of interacting with the anomaly, of feeding the pattern. I got on my radio and called Raymond. I need you to bring explosives enough to collapse that underground chamber where the magnetic anomaly originates. Can you do that? Daniel, are you insane? We don't even know what's down there. If we collapse it, we might seal the crack, or we might make it worse. But if we do nothing, the temporal collapse will continue. I'm watching it happen right now. We're running out of time. There was a long pause. "I'll need to get approval from the tribal council. This kind of operation, there's no time for approval. This is an emergency. Get the explosives. I'll take full responsibility." Another pause. "Okay, I'll be there in 2 hours. But Daniel, if this goes wrong, I know it's on me." While I waited, I watched the superimposed structures continue to flicker and merge. I could see Lisa and the boys inside the modern house, still in that trance-like state, still swaying and chanting. And I made a choice. I would never build on this land. I would never allow my family to be pulled into this nightmare. Whatever timeline led to that outcome, I would change it. I would choose differently. But even as I made that decision, I wondered if choice meant anything in a place where all possibilities existed simultaneously. Raymond arrived with his truck loaded with drilling equipment and carefully placed explosive charges. We worked quickly, setting up a pattern of drill holes around the perimeter of the anomaly. "This is going to be crude," Raymond warned. "We're essentially trying to cause a controlled cave-in of whatever's down there. It might not work, it might just make everything worse. Do it anyway." We set the charges and retreated to a safe distance. The Hogan structures were still flickering, but now they were starting to fade, becoming translucent. "The pattern's breaking down," I said. "The temporal compression is reaching a critical point. We need to act now." Raymond checked his remote detonator. "On your signal." I looked at the fading structures one more time. Saw the ghost images of all those families, all those tragedies. Saw my future wife and children, trapped in a timeline I was about to prevent. Do it. He pressed the detonator. The explosions were deep, muffled, the sound traveling up through 200 feet of rock and earth. The ground shook, and for a moment, nothing seemed to change. Then the structures vanished. All of them simultaneously, winking out like lights being switched off. The blue-purple glow faded. The whispers stopped. The magnetic field sensors dropped to normal readings, and the land was empty again. Just desert, rocks, scrub brush. We waited for an hour, monitoring the equipment, watching for any signs of the anomaly returning. But there was nothing. The location was completely normal. "I think we did it," Raymond said quietly. Whatever was down there, the cave-in disrupted it. The magnetic dynamo stopped. I should have felt relieved, but all I could think about was the last image I'd seen. Lisa and the boys, fading away, erased from that timeline I had saved them by preventing them from ever being there. But in doing so, I'd seen them disappear. Over the following weeks, I monitored the site carefully. No more Hogans appeared. No temporal distortions. The land remained empty and quiet. I filed my final report, carefully edited to remove any references to time travel or impossible physics. I wrote it up as a geological instability that we'd remediated with controlled explosives. The tribal council accepted the report without question. Life slowly returned to normal. I kept working, kept patrolling, kept serving my community. Lisa and I got married 2 years later. We bought a house in Chinle, far from mile marker 7, and we never had children. I don't know if it was a conscious choice or if something deeper was at work. But somehow, the timeline where we had Daniel Jr. and Daniel never manifested. We remained happily married but childless. Maybe I'd prevented their births by collapsing the anomaly. Maybe I'd changed the future so completely that they simply never existed. Or maybe they existed in some other timeline, in some other version of events. I'll never know. But sometimes, late at night, I dream about them 2 boys I've never met, laughing and playing, calling me Dad, and I wake up with tears on my face, mourning children who were never born. The cost of sealing the crack between worlds was higher than I'd anticipated. But it was a cost I'd pay again to save Lisa, to save future families, to stop the cycle of tragedy. The Chindi house was gone. The land was clean, and I would carry the memory of what was sacrificed for the rest of my life. 20 years have passed since I collapsed the chamber beneath mile marker 7. I'm 53 years old now, retired from the Navajo Police for 5 years. Lisa and I live quietly in our house in Chinle, growing older together, watching our friends' grandchildren grow up around us. We never had children. It's a fact I've accepted, though never quite made peace with. But this story isn't over, because 3 days ago, on October 12th, 2016, something impossible happened. I was at the grocery store in town when a boy, maybe 10 years old, walked up to me. He looked familiar in a way I couldn't place, with features that reminded me of both Lisa and myself. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you Daniel Begay?" "Yes," I replied, puzzled. "Do I know you?" "No, sir, but I know you. My name is Daniel Begay, and I need to talk to you about something important." The name hit me like a physical blow. Daniel. The name from the 2006 body cam footage, the name of the son I never had. "How do you know my name?" I managed to ask. "Because you're my father, or you were in another timeline. Can we talk somewhere private?" We sat in my truck in the grocery store parking lot. The boy, Daniel, looked at me with eyes that were definitely mine, and told me a story that shouldn't have been possible. In the timeline I came from, you and Mom had 2 boys, me and my brother Daniel Jr. We lived in a house at mile marker 7 on Route 12, and on October 12th, 2006, something happened to us. We became part of the Hogan, part of the temporal loop. Mom and Danny are still trapped there, cycling through time. But I got out. How? Because you saved me. A version of you, 20 years ago, collapsed the anomaly and disrupted the pattern. In most timelines, that destroyed us completely. We never existed. But in one branch, the disruption created a gap, a moment where the timeline split. I fell through that gap and ended up here, in this version of reality. I've been living with an uncle in Farmington for 10 years, waiting until I was old enough to find you. I couldn't speak. I was looking at a son who shouldn't exist, from a timeline I'd deliberately prevented. "I know this is hard to understand," Daniel continued. "I don't fully understand it myself, but I'm real. I exist. I'm not a ghost or an echo. I'm a living person who fell from one reality into another. Why come to me now, after 20 years? Because today is October 12th, 2016. And according to your grandfather's calendar, which I've studied extensively, today is another thin time. The strongest alignment in 30 years, and the anomaly isn't as dead as you think it is." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "The chamber you collapsed 20 years ago. It didn't destroy the source of the distortion. It just buried it deeper, and it's been building power ever since, feeding on the magnetic field, waiting for the right alignment. Tonight, at exactly 8:43 p.m., it's going to break through again. And this time, it won't just create a temporal echo. It's going to create a full rupture. How do you know this?" "Because I'm connected to it. I'm a living piece of the paradox, a timeline fragment that shouldn't exist. I can feel it building, like static electricity before a storm, and I've seen what happens if we don't stop it." "Seen how?" He pulled out a tablet and showed me a video. The footage was shaky, shot from a phone camera, but clear enough. It showed the location at mile marker 7, and rising from the ground was a column of that blue-purple light, expanding outward, consuming everything it touched. Buildings, vehicles, people, all pulled into the temporal distortion. "This is from 2026, Daniel said. 10 years from now. If the rupture happens tonight and we don't seal it permanently, it spreads. Within 10 years, the entire Chinle area becomes a temporal dead zone, Thousands of people trapped in time loops, cycling through different eras, never able to escape. Why show me a future that hasn't happened yet? Because I came from a future that did happen, found a way to access information from possible futures, and I'm trying to prevent the worst outcome. Time isn't linear, Dad. It's a web of possibilities, and right now, we're at a crucial node. What we do tonight determines which future becomes real. I wanted to dismiss this as insanity, but I'd seen too much over the years to ignore it. And something about this boy, this impossible son, rang true. What do we need to do? The chamber you collapsed is still there, buried under rubble, but the source, the thing creating the magnetic dynamo, is deeper, about 400 feet down. It's not natural, and it's not human-made, at least not made by any humans that exist in our time. What is it? I don't know exactly, but from the geological surveys I've accessed, it appears to be some kind of crystalline structure, rotating at incredible speed, generating a magnetic field that interacts with the fabric of space-time. It might be ancient technology, millions of years old, or it might be a natural formation with properties we don't understand. Either way, we need to destroy it completely. How? Daniel smiled, and it was my smile, the one Lisa always said made me look mischievous. We're going to do what you did before, but bigger. Uncle Raymond still works for the Tribal Natural Resources Department, right? Yes, but he's retired from field work. We need him, and we need his access to industrial explosives. We're going to drill deeper this time, place charges at the 400-foot level, and shatter that crystalline structure completely. That could cause an earthquake cave-ins. It could be dangerous for the whole area. Not as dangerous as a temporal rupture that spreads across the entire reservation. We evacuate the immediate area, set the charges, and detonate at exactly 8:30 p.m. before the alignment reaches peak strength. I called Raymond from the parking lot. He was skeptical at first, but when I mentioned Daniel and the possibility that the anomaly was reactivating, he agreed to meet us. An hour later, the three of us stood at Raymond's office looking at updated geological surveys of the site. Raymond had continued monitoring the location over the years as a scientific curiosity. His latest data showed exactly what Daniel had described. Deep underground, something was spinning, and the magnetic readings were climbing. It's been increasing gradually over the past 10 years, Raymond said, studying his charts. I noticed the trend, but didn't think much of it. Thought maybe it was just geological adjustment after the cave-in. But if what Daniel says is true, it's building toward another event. Can we drill down 400 feet and place charges in time? I asked. Not with conventional drilling. That would take days. But there's an old exploratory mining shaft about half a mile from the site. It goes down 600 feet. If we could access it, use it to tunnel horizontally to the target area, we might be able to place charges in a few hours. Will the Tribal Council approve this? Raymond and Anne looked at me seriously. If we ask permission, they'll want environmental studies, safety assessments, community meetings. That will take weeks. We have hours. So, no, I'm not asking permission. I'm going to do this, take the consequences, and hope I'm right. We spent the afternoon mobilizing resources. Raymond called in favors from mining engineer friends, got access to the old shaft, and secured industrial explosives. I contacted the few officers I still trusted from my days on the force, explained there was a potential geological emergency, and got the immediate area evacuated under the guise of earthquake risk. Daniel, despite being only 10 years old, showed an impressive understanding of the technical details, helping Raymond calculate the precise placement of charges needed to shatter the crystalline structure without causing wider damage. How do you know all this? I asked him as we drove toward the site. I had a lot of time to study, he said. 10 years of knowing I was a temporal anomaly, Knowing my existence was connected to this place, I learned everything I could about geology, physics, Navajo cosmology, anything that might help me understand what happened to me and how to prevent it from happening to others. Why didn't you come to me sooner? He looked at me with old eyes and a young face. Because I wasn't sure you'd believe me, and because I needed to wait for the right moment. Too soon, and we wouldn't have the resources or knowledge too late, and the rupture would be unstoppable. Today is the exact right moment. We reached the old mining shaft at 4 p.m. The sun was already dropping toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, the same light I'd seen 20 years ago when this all began. Raymond's team had already gone down, drilling horizontal access tunnels toward the target coordinates. We descended in a rickety elevator cage, dropping into darkness, the temperature rising as we went deeper. At the 400-foot level, we found Raymond covered in rock dust, supervising the placement of shaped charges around a section of wall. "We've hit something," he said, pointing to a spot where they'd drilled through. "Behind this rock face there's a cavity, and inside that cavity, we're getting readings unlike anything I've ever seen. Intense magnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation across multiple spectra, and something else. A vibration at a frequency that shouldn't exist in nature." Daniel approached the drill hole and peered through. Even from where I stood, I could see blue-purple light emanating from inside. "That's it," Daniel said. "That's the source." We worked quickly, placing charges in a carefully calculated pattern. The plan was to shatter the cavity wall, expose the crystalline structure, then detonate a second set of charges to destroy it completely. At 7 p.m., we finished placement and retreated back up the shaft. The surface team had set up a command post a safe distance away, monitoring seismic sensors and magnetic field detectors. The sun was setting now, the thin time approaching. I could feel it, a building pressure in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm, the same sensation I'd felt 20 years ago. At 7:45 p.m., Daniel suddenly grabbed my arm. "Dad, something's wrong. The rupture, it's starting early. The alignment is stronger than I calculated." The magnetic sensors were spiking, showing readings even higher than before. And in the distance at the mile marker 7 location, I could see that blue-purple glow starting to rise from the ground. "We're out of time," Raymond said. "We need to detonate now." "Wait," Daniel said, still staring at the glow. "If we detonate while the rupture is already opening, we might just make it worse. We need to time it exactly right. Wait until the rupture reaches peak intensity, then shatter the source at the exact moment. That way, the disruption will cascade back through the temporal distortion and collapse it completely." "How do we know when it reaches peak intensity?" "I'll know. I can feel it." Daniel closed his eyes, and I saw his hands trembling. "It's getting stronger. The pull. It wants to draw me back, make me part of the pattern again." At 8:20 p.m., the glow had intensified into a column of light, exactly as shown in the video from 2026. Inside that column, I could see shapes forming, structures, people, fragments of different timelines, all trying to manifest simultaneously. "Almost there," Daniel whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. "The pressure is building. I can see them, Mom and Danny. They're trying to reach us from inside the loop." At 8:42 p.m., Daniel's eyes snapped open. "Now! Detonate now!" Raymond hit the remote detonator. Deep underground, the charges exploded in sequence. The ground shook violently, and for a moment, I thought we'd miscalculated, that we were about to cause a catastrophic collapse. Then, the blue-purple column of light flickered. The structures inside it began to destabilize, fracturing into fragments, and Daniel screamed. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, and I saw his body beginning to fade, becoming translucent like the temporal echoes I'd seen before. Daniel! I grabbed him, trying to hold him solid, but my hands passed through him. "It's okay, Dad," he said, his voice distant, echoing, "This is what's supposed to happen. I was always part of the pattern. Destroying the source means destroying all the temporal fragments, including me. No, there has to be another way. There isn't, but it's okay. I got to meet you. I got to help save everyone. That's enough." He smiled, and even as he faded, I could see Lisa in that smile. "Tell Mom, in whatever timeline she exists, that I love her. And thank you for giving me life, even if it was a paradoxical one." The column of light collapsed inward, imploding like a dying star. The ground shook one final time, then went still, and Daniel was gone, faded completely, returned to whatever probability space-temporal anomalies occupy when their timeline ceases to exist. I stood there in the desert darkness, arms still outstretched where I'd tried to hold my impossible son, and wept. Raymond put a hand on my shoulder but said nothing. What could he say? The seismic monitors showed the underground chamber had collapsed completely. The magnetic readings dropped to 0 and stayed there. The crystalline structure, whatever it had been, was destroyed. Over the following days, we monitored the site carefully. No more anomalies, no temporal distortions. The land was finally, truly clean. But the cost haunted me. I'd saved thousands of people from being trapped in time loops, but I'd lost the only child I'd ever had, even if his existence had been impossible from the start. Lisa found me sitting in my truck outside our house 3 days later, staring at nothing. "Daniel, what's wrong? You've been different since that geological work at mile marker 7. "What happened out there?" I wanted to tell her. Wanted to explain about Daniel, about the son we never had who somehow existed anyway, who'd sacrificed himself to save everyone. But how could I explain something I barely understood myself? "Just tired," I said. "It was intense work." She looked at me with those knowing eyes. "You're lying. You've been holding something back for years. Ever since that strange case when we first got married. The one you said was classified." So I told her. Everything. The temporal anomalies, the Hogans cycling through time, the future I'd prevented where we had children. And Daniel, the boy from a timeline that ceased to exist, who'd lived just long enough to help seal the rupture. Lisa listened without interrupting, her face going through shock, disbelief, and finally, a deep sadness. "We had a son," she said quietly. "In another life, we had 2 sons. And you've carried that knowledge alone all these years? I didn't want to burden you with impossible memories. But they're not impossible, are they? If Daniel was real enough to help you, real enough to sacrifice himself, then somewhere in the web of time those children existed. They were real." She took my hand. "We can't have children now. We're too old. But we can honor their memory, the sons we never had, who existed anyway. We can live in a way that makes their sacrifice meaningful. And that's what we've tried to do. We volunteer with the youth programs on the reservation. We mentor young people who remind us of who Daniel might have been. We tell stories, teach traditions, try to make a difference. It's not the same as raising children, but it's something. It's been 3 weeks since the final collapse of the anomaly. I'm writing this account because Daniel asked me to, in those final moments before he faded, document everything," he'd said. Someday, someone might need to know. Someone else might encounter a thin place where time bleeds through. They need to know it can be stopped, but also what it costs. So I've written it all down. The domestic calls that led to families that didn't exist. The Hogans that cycled through decades. The body cam footage that showed impossible things. the magnetic anomaly deep underground. And Daniel, the temporal fragment who became my son for one brief day. The tribal archives will store this account, classified and sealed for 50 years. Maybe by then, we'll understand time well enough to make sense of what happened. Or maybe it will remain a mystery, another strange story from the reservation, dismissed as folklore by those who prefer rational explanations. I don't know if I did the right thing, collapsing the anomaly, preventing those timelines from fully manifesting. I saved thousands of people from being trapped in temporal loops, but I also erased possibilities, destroyed potential futures, killed a son who'd already been born in another reality. The moral weight of that choice is something I carry every day. But late at night, when I'm between sleeping and waking, I sometimes hear a voice. A boy's voice, laughing, calling me Dad. And I choose to believe that somewhere, in some corner of the infinite possibilities that make up reality, Daniel exists. Happy, whole, free from the temporal anomaly that birthed him. It's probably just wishful thinking, probably just my grief creating comforting illusions. But after everything I've seen, after all the impossible things that turned out to be real, I think I'm entitled to believe in one more impossibility somewhere. In another timeline, I'm a father. And my son knows I love him. That's the echo that remains, and it's enough.